Okay, so here we are again, and today I wanted to show you my client hunter. And if you haven't seen, or if you've seen the job system video that I'm guessing is kind of like at the end of the video. There's gonna like be a link somewhere, and if not, then check my channel. It'll be somewhere. And so when I built that system, I was kind of thinking that I was going to get a job. And I realized that I don't necessarily want a job in the traditional way, and it's a very hard market. And so I kind of, shifted into more of a client mode where I'm sort of, I have a set of services and I've been doing this for a bunch of years. So I was thinking maybe I could, use the same kind of approach to seeing if I could find some client work instead in consultancy or AI or fractional AI officer, fractional CTO, something like that, advisory, like I said. Well, I guess see if I can find some clients. So and the system that I came up with is very, very similar to the job system. So if you've seen the job system, then you'll recognize this really quickly. If you haven't seen the job system, then I'll walk you through everything, and then I might reference the job system a bit, so you can sort of know how things relate to each other. But you don't really need to see both videos. It's a 40 minutes of your life. You're never going to get back if you don't like it. So but I guess here's my client system, and before we sort of go anywhere, what I want to do is I just kind of want to just go here and open up my jobs folder like this, and so you can sort of see, and then again, this is repeat information if you've seen this yesterday. So or in yesterday, I recorded the job system yesterday. That's why I'm referring it to yesterday. I have no idea about relative time. Yesterday might be 100 years in the future. I have no idea when yesterday is. But I guess this is the job system, and this is part of a much bigger system that I have for managing, well, obviously my job search and my client search, but also my content production when I'm writing books. I have a system here that allows me to do reviews of those books. I train it to be able to recognize my voice as I'm writing things, not my literal spoken voice as you're hearing right now, but the voice and how I write things and how I sound when I'm writing things, and all of these things, and my background, my resume, my projects that I've worked on, my jobs that I've had, all of those things are sort of part of this giant system here. And this allows me to use my agents in order to get a very, very broad picture of what I'm doing. So when I go out, or when the system goes out and it looks for clients, it knows very well who I am and what I'm capable of doing, and it can map that to all of my capabilities, right? And this is the entire system here. There's a ton of things happening, and it's actually the same system that does all three things now. I am kind of a stickler for having separate systems, but these things seem to be very related to each other. So I kind of left all of them together. But I guess here's some of the stuff that's here. And if you've read any of my books, you'll know that I have like these roles that are sort of agents that do different things. You'll recognize Rob. If you follow me on LinkedIn, at least, you've heard about Rob, is my chief of staff AI agent. You see, by the way, that all of these are markdown files. There's a thing to be said about agents, which can be somewhat confusing. The way that I use agents, and then I know there's some argument about what an agent actually is. In my world, an agent is someone that does something for you, right? And that can be anything, but there's also sort of technical definitions that are usually vendor specific. So OpenAI has their ChatGPT agent, and Anthropic has Claude agent, and they can sort of do things, and they use like sub agents as a term, and it's a lot of confusing things to me. If you haven't seen any of my books, this is kind of my definition of an agent. It's basically just a markdown file. They're quite complex. Actually, here's the start of my next book on agent. We'll just spin up another Claude instance here. That's, by the way, is for my. I'm not sure if you saw it, which is doesn't really matter, but sort of here's my idea about how I can structure my content. Here's the ideas that I'm working on, and then sort of my content engineer. So when we're talking about these roles, in any case, my content engineer is here's the prompt that I'm using. I'm going to start writing on my second agent books, and here's what I would like to cover in this book. Some slightly more advanced topics than the 101 stuff, right? In any case, here's my content engineer. It has a as Rob does. It has a file, and it's sort of my content is important to me. So this is a fairly long file. Most of my simpler agents are, 20, 50 lines of code, something like that. And it sort of defines what the agent is and what its responsibilities are, how it works, and things like that. It has multiple things. You see here that there's also a content engineer knowledge, which is sort of what the content engineer has learned about how it works, right? It's not about like how my content is, it's how content engineer works. So it might realize, for example, that it's much better at working with tone of voice if it's running on Claude. And that's obviously not something that has anything to do with my content. It's just how content engineer works. But again, so these agents do various things. We'll visit some of them. Content engineer has a small role to play in the client system as well. But Rob is also not super important, except that Rob is sort of my chief of staff. So most of my project, when I start new project, I start them through Rob, right? And content engineer, like I said, knows my voice and everything. So it's sort of here's the first take on the content that I had, and so scraps the structures, and I never use AI to write. I just use it for ideation and things like that. But I guess if you look at the other roles, you'll see here that I have a job hunter, and that's the one that I covered in the other video. But you also now have a client finder, which so far is a bit simpler. And the reason why it's a bit simpler, well, it's like you see here, it's like 80 lines of code, is that a lot of the things that I built for the job system is able to be reused in the client finder, right? So what you'll know is, or what you'll see is that there's some tools that are running here, and there's some, there's a research agent, and there's some prompts that the research agent is able to run with. There's some tasks that I'm running here, and this is my sort of how I schedule my tasks to run. So if you're looking at, for example, here's my client hunter daily pipeline. What that does is that it goes out and searches through various sources in order to see if it can find projects for me, or companies that are looking for people with my skill sets. It'll go through that every morning. It runs 5:30 in the morning, or 5:17 in the morning now, and then it'll send me a report, and that report looks something like this, right? So it'll say, hey, we find this market tech digital. I haven't looked at this yet. This is like in the morning. It found this one, and something that's scheduled for review, something we should follow up. Like I'll show you this in a moment, but basically this is sort of how what it sends. And if you saw again the jobs email, that like looks like this now. And I ran this morning as well. So you sort of, here's the job. So you see it's kind of similar. It gives me just an overview of what I need to look at today. I have a problem with reading. So when I get like, and you can see the job thing here, it's like there's hundreds of jobs here that come in every day. I'm dozing off. Right? So that's why I'm kind of like, I have this short email, everything about the fold, and so that's what the job hunter does in the morning, or the client hunter does in the morning. It goes out and finds these things, looks for job boards, or sources, LinkedIn posts, things that are can be properly automated, and then it'll put that into a database, right? So that's one of the roles that this client finder is doing. So in addition to that, I also have the researcher, and again, repeat stuff from yesterday, really. But the researcher is the sort of it's kind of a very, very advanced version of what I'm teaching in the first book on agents, by the way. But basically, this is an agent that is responsible for doing research. And for example, here, and then this is what I was mentioning earlier, that the researcher will learn that things about itself. So researcher, as should have a knowledge base. It doesn't actually have it right now for reasons, but I'll get to that later. Um, but this is kind of what it would do, right? I've manually added these particular lines of code because it doesn't have a research knowledge yet. But this basically says that, we want to run our research through Codex and not in Cloud Code. And the reason for that is that Cloud Code is, I don't want to say anything, use bad words, but it uses a lot of tokens. Right? So it uses a lot of tokens. If I spin off a Cloud Code for doing, or any Cloud model really, or a Cloud harness really, if I spin that off and do research, I can't do anything else that day. Right. Whereas Codex has a lot more efficiency. It's not just that it gives me more tokens; it actually also does the research a lot more efficient. But I guess so. We want to look at income opportunities, blah blah blah, and it's actually a bit more complex than what it looks here, right? Because behind sort of all of these things, there's a set of prompts that researcher uses for certain things, right? So it has this daily pipeline. This is one of the things that are that's a bit complex right now because it's actually been mixing up some of these pipelines, because again I have the job pipeline and I have the clients pipeline that both do stuff. But here are basically the instructions for how researchers should work with when it's looking for this data, right, or looking for these clients. So here, for example, it'll run this particular thing. It'll go and check my email. It'll do some other stuff. Actually, it doesn't do that. It checks the lead handler if I get any leads. So again, it's again missing. It's confusing some things here, and I'm going to clean this up at some point. But this is an example of sort of how this particular prompt works with an instruction. It's kind of like a skill. And if you don't know what skills are, that's also something that I'll be covering in the upcoming book on agents. But essentially, they're package capabilities, right? So this is how I run my morning routine. I don't necessarily use the normal skill.md format for things. And again, I have my reasons. And again, read my book if you want to do that. But essentially, this is kind of equivalent of a skill. It's something that this particular agent, the research agent, is capable of doing, right? With some instructions. And similar thing here is like, here's if I want to look into someone, a person, a hiring agent, something like that. Well, here's how we do that. Here's the deep dive. Here's the processes that we follow. One of the key things that's really important when you're working with sort of scalable and stable AI systems is that you need to have processes in place for things, right? So these processes here is essentially describing how I do this particular deep dive, right? When I'm looking for a person, well, I'm going to do a deep dive, and here's the process for doing that, right? What do? We spin off an agent. We don't want to have partial research, so actually spin off a neutral agent that doesn't know that is part of my sort of job system or client findings. It's a bunch of things that happen in this particular file, and that's kind of, like I said, it's one of those key things that is important to know when you're working with agents. You need to, if you want repeatable results, and if you want results that are verifiable, that you know what you're actually getting, you need to have these processes in place, right? And then again, I'll cover that in the book. But I guess let's get back to the system. So researcher is one of the agent that do a lot of heavy lifting here. And Rob obviously is my chief of staff, does a bunch of different things. But now let me sort of go to this that you saw here initially. This is sort of the other end of everything. So what you've seen first is a ton of these underlying prompts and methods and processes, and then how I organize my folders, where my knowledge is. All of those things are part of one giant system in this case. Um, there's a reason. Well, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I kind of mix some of these systems together. And the reason why I can do that, if you ask like people that are genuinely good at AI, they will usually tell you that you should like make one system or one set of agent, or one set of instructions per thing that you're doing, right? If you have a legal company, you have some lawyers, whatever you're doing, and you want to sort of do contract generation, Well, you don't want to mix that up with other things like, client specific data or things like that, because if you do, then you risk bleeding systems together, and suddenly you have a whole mess of suddenly there's a way to exploit your contract generation online, and people can use that to extract sensitive data. You don't want to do that. If you have a medical system and you have a system that does analysis of x-rays or whatever you're doing, you don't want that mixed up with patient data again for the same thing. You sort of want to keep these things separated. So when I'm mixing these things together now, I'm doing that both to sort of learn myself how that works and see where my things are, but also because these agents then become a lot more powerful, right? Because now suddenly they have insight into what I do, and we can see this now if I look at one of these entries here, for example, you'll see that there's a general description here. I'm gonna let me actually do one thing, because this is, I don't know who this is. Mm, yeah, okay, fine. It might be good. We'll use this as an example. I have another example here that I've actually, contacted, and then I sent them a message earlier. But essentially, we can use this as an example now to just see how things are, because this seems to be like 97. This is a scale from 0 to 100, so this seems to be a very very good match. But I guess the point that I was getting at is that when you design these systems that are this complex, like my job system right now has more than 2,000 markdown files. Right? A lot of those files are logs and reports, and here's the research that we found on this particular client or this particular job. But it's still a massive amount of files, and like when you're mixing up this system, it can be very very easy for these agents to just go completely bonkers and just say, oh yeah, I want to look for Björn, and I want to like search through. Well, you're going to get like 1,500 files. Of those are going to be have my name in it, so that's not going to be a good searching thing, right? So the way that you kind of want to approach this with these agents is that you need to be very very good at information architecture, right? It's not about, and this is kind of what everyone is saying, like if your data is crap, you're going to get crap results, and that's the same thing when you're designing these agent systems. Like the machine learning people say that if you feed the system junk data, if you don't normalize, if you don't like clean your data, if you don't do all the data preparation steps that you want to do before you start training a model, your system is going to be crap, right? Well, it's the same thing here. Is that if you just throw, and this is kind of what everyone is doing, like you just throw a bunch of files at ChatGPT and they say, hey, figure some stuff out, right? You're not going to get good results. You're going to get good results when these agents are told exactly where to find things. Like you can see here, again, let's do something else now. We want to extract some things here. Very, very simple things. Here's how we do this, right? Here's the research package. Get a report and markdown. You're going to output this thing here. Here's what you want to do. Here's what you're going to link to. Here's everything on how we do a strategy extraction from something, right? To be fair, I actually haven't seen this, but again, this is one of the files that either Rob or any of the other agents have created for me. So it's basically like, this is how we do this. It's not going to search for this report file, right? It's going to go through. And this is, I think, this might actually be something that the client hunter has made in order to build out my strategy for this client system. Oh, doesn't matter. So you want to reference things exactly when they're needed, right? Here's we use this particular file here, right? You don't put that file in here and say, oh yeah, and when you're deep diving into a person's and doing some background research, or it's all public sources obviously, but when you're doing this, like we don't want to like copy this file here. Here's what we want to output, here's everything, but you kind of reference these files and say, this is what you need to load right now, and maintaining that control is what allows an agent to do very very complex tasks without losing focus. Like you want to have laser focus when you're doing something with an agent, and this kind of system is what you're doing with that. So I guess get back to the thing here. So now we have this thing here. This looks really really great. If you haven't seen the job system, again, follows the same format really, or whether you've seen it or not doesn't really change the fact. But basically, this opportunity here now is in this scored state, right? So right now, I basically just know that this has had a technical, or not a technical, a mechanical test to see if this is something that fits me, right? So in the client system, you saw that this has, we have these gates, which is basically like, is something here just blocking this from being, if there's like, yeah, we only want people that can speak Hindu. Okay, fine. That's, I don't speak Hindu. I speak seven languages, but Hindu is not one of them. So now we want to see that, hey, we need something that supports English, right? And then there's reasons, but I prefer to work in English. And in the job hunting system, there were a lot more gates here that basically filters out if this is something that works or not, right? Then there's some weighted scores, which is basically how we arrive at this 97 number. Like how well does this fit what I'm looking for, right? And in the job hunting system, again, this was checking things like, is the salary in place? Is there like, does it match my skill set? Like, does it, in the right areas? If I have to like move somewhere, is it in an area that I would consider moving to? What are these things that I want to score this particular job on? Well, we do the similar thing here to see how well this opportunity fits what I'm looking for, right? So this clearly has gotten a very high score. Actually, believe me, while I'm doing this, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to just research this right now. I'm going to start this research, and now you'll see that this is going to run in the background, and now this will be updated and say that the research is running. So I'm just going to start it because it can take a few minutes. But we see now that we have like 97, very good score, and that's mostly because of these things, right? Now, the other thing that the job system didn't do is that it doesn't classify what this opportunity matches of my services, right? So I'm currently exploring 4 or 5 different channels that I can do in order to help people. One of them is simple advisory. You pay me by the hour. I'm gonna, you call me and I answer questions, or I join a meeting, whatever, ad hoc by the hour, right? So that's one thing. I can do workshop, which is basically set up training like I'm doing right now, but maybe for half a day or something like that. Train your executive team or train your developers, something like that. I can build systems for you. I can review your current strategies. I have several different channels that I kind of want to examine here. So this is what we call these offer lanes. So you see several of these here right now. That might be something that I could be doing for people, right? So this, in addition to what it was doing with a client or with the job hunter, will actually also sort of try to match this into a particular lane. Like these people might be someone who are interested in me as a fractional CTO, right? So what I can do here now, first of all, I get obviously links to their pages, and I get the link to the company, and I get the link to the founder, and I can start looking into see if this is actually a really good fit, right? Second degree, this is in the United States, seems to be writing in English, understands English. Like these are things I can do sort of my manual um, research on this, and then I can press that button at the bottom here. So you'll see this button right now is in the research state. This is the similar thing again that I can do for my job system. When I like an opportunity, or I want to like know more about the hiring team, like what's the culture at the company, all of these things that I would want to know before I apply for a job, I press that research button. And now again, you're seeing here, I'm sitting here, I'm not touching anything else. You're seeing my screen, everything is sort of, this is all of this happens automatically. It'll go and find that information for me and do a re-evaluation of this 97 number, right? Because this is a very mechanical failure, right? Does it support English? Yes, awesome. But what if actually, 99% of their crew is in Russia? And okay, fine, they have written their job hunting or their web pages in English. But if I'm expected to know Russian, well, that's something that's going to come up when we do a deep dive into that company. Um, and it'll go a lot deeper. So let's see now how far it's gone. Is it done yet? We'll refresh. No, it's still running. This is, by the way, all you've seen so far here, except that pushing the, or like what happens when I push that button, is done by the client hunter, right? The client hunter has learned a lot of its processes from the job finder, right? So the job finder, again, if you go back here, you'll see that there's two roles here, job hunter. Well, I mixed these up, doesn't really matter. But here's the job hunter, and here's a client finder, right? So these have learned things from each other, or actually mostly client finder has learned things from the job hunter, and it's come up with these processes, right? So here's my client operating system. Here's um, how I find clients, right? So if you go in here now, we can look at these files, and we can open this in something that's a bit more easy to read, right? Here's how I try to find clients. Right? Here's a strategy. We're going to look for LinkedIn. We're going to look for search engines. We're going to look at non-priority channels. Well, actually, this is expanded a bit, and you can see here as well. This has expanded a bit. I have more offers now right now. But I guess so. Here's my client operating system. This is a process now that is completely separate from the client finder, right? So the client finder, you'll see here, it's very, very basic so far. Again, I haven't worked a lot with it. It has a task system, which basically I can assign it like, stuff that you're supposed to be doing, and here's what you're, oh, it doesn't have any tasks right now. It has some to do stuff. Oh, we'll follow up on this later. But I guess it's a very, very basic agent so far. The job hunter has more things, but essentially these processes, for example, video production, something completely different. This is how I produce my videos when I do them automatically, like talking head videos. Well, here's a process for doing that, right? Here's how I produce my talking head videos on RunPod, and here's knowledge. These you sort of recognize more as normal skill files, but this is also completely independent of director, who is kind of the only one that would be using this particular knowledge here. And this is, as I mentioned earlier, part of how you structure your information. If I wanted to change the implementation of my client finder to be completely different, well, I wouldn't need now to sort of redo all of these processes for how we actually work with finding clients, right? Because that's separate from that agent. And not just that, but it also means that other agents can see this information. So I can talk with Rob and I can say, hey, look at my lead scoring. How do I score my leads? What's important for me? Blah, blah, blah. Here's how we're looking for things. Like, here's how I score things. I want to rebalance this now because, Client Finder is a bit bad, or I want to test a new thing for whatever. I can still have Rob work in these files here because they are part of the processes that I've designed. And this is, like I said, part of that organizing information, which agents have access to what things and what's sort of considered their own personal domain. And I'm saying personal, they're obviously not persons. We should be careful about anthropomorphizing our agents. But I guess let's see if this research has been completed. Yay, we have completed. Now we seem to dropped a bit. There might be some reasons for that. We want to get some scoring notes here. We'll see that, hey, there they have they're a live VP of engineering search. They're active. They're post series A is great, kind of my thing. Strong fit for Björn, Passenger's internal technical leadership, blah blah blah. Okay, fine. Not as a generic AI consultant. That makes sense, right? So now I have this deep dive into this company, and this looks slightly different than what it does for my job hunter, for example. So what you'll see here is that you'll still see the company overview, but you won't see as much definition or much research into what the job would entail, right? Because in this case, I would kind of be coming in from the outside. I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, here's what developers at this company is doing. No, because I'm not pitching myself as a developer. I might be doing that in the job search or something else, but it's kind of not focused on as much on what the job is, because I know what my job is in these cases. I know what I'm going after them. I'm going to come with them to them with the product, and kind of we need to tune that product. But it's basically going to me telling them, hey, here's how we do stuff, right? But anyways, they have this company overview. We have a contact profile. I get to know a bit more about this person, right? And this is very, very important Now I'm actually out of personalized outreaches for LinkedIn, but in my job system, if you've seen that, and if you haven't, you know that there's a package to get a get hired package, which includes an outreach message. I don't have that right now, so I'm going to like manually do some review of this particular person afterwards. I'm going to go through their like I generally tend to do double checks on everything, but my this research report now has sort of kind of done a bunch of that preliminary research to see if how well it considers this position to match what I'm able to offer and then what I'm looking for in clients, right? It has buying signals, what are they looking for, what are their problem areas. We can do, here's how we want to classify this, as there's an actual active work here that we need to be doing about something. Recommend approach, go for as a fractional CTO, as a VP engineering. Yeah, maybe. Opening angle, you don't need. And again, this is, yeah. mm, this is kind of outreach messages. I don't really want to do this, but I guess I can hook them up with on LinkedIn, and I can do some additional searches for them, right? So all the background here, all of this has been vetted now, so I can go in, I can check the actual what they're looking for. I can go in and say, hey, you know what I've been looking for. Ah, there you go. Even better. Something isn't actually pointing to the right place. New upload methods. Acknowledge. Yeah, I don't know what this is doing. Guides, home, uh, advanced. I don't know. I'll go and look into this, right? But essentially, here's what the background is for these particular searches, and now I have this score here, and that'll tell me something about this system. So if again comparing this to how the job hunting system was from yesterday, this is a lot more focused as a sales tool than just like me positioning myself as a potential employee. This has things like, okay, cool, I'm gonna contact these people, which means that I'm going to at some point I'm going to go in here and I'm going to like send this guy a connection request, and I might do that with a depending if they have a message. I'll click on these buttons once I actually get to. Can I do that right now? No, I don't have these outreach things right now, and I'm not going to pay for premium. Um, but I guess I can do some additional studies here now when I have access to this, and I can look at their company. I can do all of these things. But this is again much more as a CRM system. So you don't have that get package thing here, for example. I do have the research, which is important, and I have kind of the thing that's most important for me, which is this button here, right? So this is Rob. When I click this button right now, do I want to try the new model? No, I don't want to try a new model. I'm fine with the model that I have. Go away. Go do your job. So what this does right now is that it will spin up Rob, give it the context, and this happens in the background. So I can now, go background here, and I can go background. I can go back here, and I can look at things. Here's another thing, and I can look at more things, and here's another one. And actually, I think I connected with this guy here the other day. Yeah, I connected with this guy, so I'm going to reach out. Now I heard a ding in my ear, so I know my research is ready. But again, still here, no research. Okay, cool. I want to do some research here because this is a company that I'm interested in pursuing something, right? So I can do this. While I'm doing this now, we have loaded up a conversation context with Rob. Rob knows pretty much everything about me, right? So when I say, hey, Rob, go and do whatever, it'll know how this fits me. So now I can, okay, we can close this one up right now. But if I now want to have this conversation, come on, give me a review opportunity. No, why doesn't this show up? Well, that was silly. Why isn't my conversation showing up? Let me try this again. Because it should show up and it should give me, there we go, consulting lead. For some reason, it wasn't refreshed. But I guess now the conversation is loaded up. I don't have to sit and wait for Rob to do its thing. It'll just like go this, and when it's ready, it'll ping in my ear. And congratulations, now I can go in here. And it has done the preliminary evaluation, right? It'll check that this fits what I'm actually looking for. It'll do the not AI strategy as adoption. Okay, cool, that's fine. It'll do all of these things, and now I can have a conversation, right? I can say, okay, cool. What would I do? Well, I would probably do a LinkedIn and outreach. I would try to schedule a call with them or something. I don't know. I'll need to read through this. Um, and I don't like these opener. I don't. I think the problem right now. Yeah, it doesn't actually. Okay, I know what's wrong here. Read rob.md. Why isn't it rob? Oh, there we go. .md and try again. Okay, I just wrote a book on context engineering. I shouldn't be doing this. I know I'm not following my own advice. But I guess Rob, the problem here is that like it does all of this stuff here, and Rob knows it shouldn't. Um, but if you see here, it actually didn't load Rob. Right? It's reading the brief and it's just running in the normal agent. I'll need to fix that as well. Again, I like to show these systems how they actually work, and in this case, when it doesn't work. But basically, now, yeah, here you go. So this is what Rob does, right? So Rob kind of delegates, right? Recommended writing. Yes, come on, Rob. Go ahead and spin off, right? So yeah, so Rob would normally just do this, and it'll come back with things. But Rob also knows that, um, you know, it'll need to. Yeah, you see here is that Rob doesn't do evaluation about whether this is a good lead for me. Like Rob is the architect. Rob does you saw that already, right? Rob orchestrates. Rob sits at the top of things, chief of staff. He doesn't actually go out and then buy pizza. He tells someone to go and buy pizza, right? And that's something that Rob has learned. If you have been through, my stories about Rob before, Rob knows how to order pizza, and we take Rob behind the shed, and bad things happen to Rob. So Rob now doesn't order pizza. Rob tells someone to go and order pizza. But I guess now I have this one, and we have some ideas, and there's a why isn't this two handoffs are queued? Why do you queue them? I want to draft them, like spin off. Okay, fine. I'm not going to do this right now. But essentially, what normally would happen is that Rob would say, "Hey, you know what? Figuring out this and doing background search and that's not my job. I have a researcher. I have a client finder. I have a whatever I was looking for content engineer. First outreach. Yeah, that's what content engineer. Content engineer knows my voice. Content engineer has content. Look here, my voice. Here's all my patterns, and I don't think I actually saw this, but this is like how I never speak in any situation. Blah blah blah. Here's my what I never say. Here's what I do say. Here's the way. Does the first line make a specific claim? Right, so yeah, okay, fine. So like, content engineer knows how to sound like me, and that's kind of the mistake that you saw here earlier. Is that this doesn't sound like me? I would never say anything like that. I would say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And then I'm pretty laid back guy and casual. So I would never say, "Oh yeah, well, greetings to you, dear Lord," whatever. It's not going to do any of that stuff. But content engineer knows how I sound, so content engineer is able to write a much better opening message with my voice in it. And I'm not going to use it in that case, but like that's why I notice now that this doesn't sound like me. And the reason is essentially that this wasn't actually run by Rob. When Rob runs this, it'll fire shit like that off to content engineer. And then, pardon my French, by the way, I'm raised by barbarians. And same thing with Client Finder. Rob doesn't know if this is a good fit for me, right? But Rob knows that Client Finder knows that. So Rob's responsibility in this case, again, just to show you how these systems are designed to sort of trickle the responsibilities from starting from some place and just like narrowing down to where it needs to go. And that's what Rob does, and yeah. But I guess so. Now we have clients, and we can reach out and we can do some things. I know that the work that we've done here right now is a bit simpler than what you saw yesterday, or again, yesterday or 100 years ago. I don't know. But in the job video, this is it's a lot simpler. But you've also seen sort of more of the background of things now, how these prompts are actually done. You've seen the voicing here. Here's my corpus index of things like what are we actually doing here. Samples. This should be updated. It's not updated. I'll have to, no, okay, so here's updated. Yeah, there we go. So these are basically like, samples of my voice. It's using for coming up with things like style guides and whatever. You've seen a lot more of the things that are behind the scene now than was in the Job Hunter video. So yeah, but I guess I hope this was useful. I hope you've seen something, you've been inspired by something. If you like, this is not a system you can download. I'm not going to sell you this or pitch you this or whatever. I wanted to show you a working AI system, right? Because I think it's important, as I also mentioned in the job hunting video, that I think it's important that you actually see how AI systems work and when they don't work. And this is something that I'm building and I built, and then I use it. This runs every single day, unlike the job system, which only runs when I feel like applying for jobs. Um, if I have slight hopes, feeling optimistic one day, I usually fire up my job system and then get depressed again. But this is a working system. You've seen how it works. We can make changes to things and it'll change outcomes. It'll you've seen how we specify how we organize the information, how we specify what how a process works, and what we expect to get out of it. All these formatting things here, getting exactly this type of data, like it's matching to exactly the things that we want to do. Like all of these things are things that are in real AI systems a lot more complex than just going to ChatGPT and saying, hey, give me a job, make no mistakes, right? That's these systems that actually do real AI work or real work with AI are a lot more complex. And that's why I don't want to like give you this impression that just watch my 42 minutes video by now, and you know everything about making AI stuff. You don't. Like, this is something that actually literally takes years to learn how to build these systems. And now, by the way, we have this next thing, and I want to actually look at this. Is there something that I want to do here? Fractional CTO, but position is as a paid architect. Okay, fine. I guess. So this is now something that I'm using, and I'm using this every single day. I don't necessarily pursue opportunities every single day because I'm doing other stuff or whatever. But it's a system that actually works. It's rock stable. I get these email every single day. They look exactly like this. I'd show you other ones, but again, it doesn't really prove anything. So, but here's like this is how the whole system works. So I'm going to wrap it right now. I'm not going to show you anymore. If you have any questions, feel free to post them below or whatever things are. If you want to see that job video as well, which kind of is very similar to this one, but now instead of focusing on client outreach, looks for jobs instead, then it's going to be somewhere. I don't know how to set things up. I don't know how YouTube or wherever this is actually works. But yeah, I hope this was useful. Put comments below, questions below. Feel free to share like whatever people are doing these days. And I hope to see you again in the next video.